Hello, and welcome to Alton's Story, where tabletop tales come to life. I'm your host, Frederick Smith, author of and narrator for The Acquired Taste for Adventure, a D&D audiobook series based upon actual Dungeons & Dragons games. And with that, let's get started. Alton's Story, The Acquired Taste for Adventure, Chapter 1, continued. "You there, the elves!" Alton cried out in the common tongue, trying to sound as brave as he could. "We don't want to fight, but we will if we have to. May we have the road?" There was some low conversation back and forth in Elvish, and Alton was afraid he'd made a mistake. The elves knew where he was now, and would come looking to kill him for sure. But instead, after a long moment, they called back to him. "There's already been enough fighting tonight, I say," Erevan answered, boldly projecting his voice like a stage actor. "Let us come out into the firelight and be seen by each other." The two elves stood up and made their way toward the fire. Jazzberry and Malik emerged from behind the cart, while Alton clawed his way out of the scrub. Then all three approached the elves cautiously. The dim light emanating from what remained of the fire barely lit their faces, but it was enough to see that these two elves were an unlikely pair. One was a high elf, a commonly seen race that enjoyed peaceful relations with all the civilized beings of the realms, while the other appeared to be no less than a dark elf. The Drow, the Dark Elves, were one of the most feared of all races on Faerun, and one that was almost never seen on the surface world. Their home was the Underdark, a vast maze of underground caverns and catacombs, which they rarely left except to execute violent raids upon those that lived above them. This meant, of course, that if a surface dweller were to see a drow, that surface dweller was moments away from meeting a grisly fate. And while Alton, Jazzberry, and Malik had all heard stories of exceptionally rare drow that had become friendly with the surface world, these stories were generally dismissed as impossibly silly tales told by fools in taverns. But here they were, looking at one with their own eyes, and since they weren't fighting each other in bloody combat, those stories must have been true. "Well met," said Alton, his eyes fixed on Idriana. Idriana was in fact only half drow, but the rest of them couldn't have been expected to know it at first glance. The gray-skinned ranger, who apparently only spoke Elvish, said something to the other high elf, to which he nodded, then turned to the group. "Idriana, my friend," he gestured toward his companion, "wishes to greet you. She is skilled with her swords and bow, and capable of following even the slightest of trails. And I am Baron Erevan Leandon, trained fencer and magician, and sole heir to the noble house of Leandon." He smiled broadly and bowed. "We greet you with warm salutations." The high elf's common was steady and practiced, with no discernible accent, and he was able to speak with a formality that implied he had been well educated. All of this had happened so quickly, Alton barely knew what to say, but an introduction was probably in order. "I'm Alton, Alton Deepbarrel," he stammered awkwardly. "That's Jazzberry over there, and he's Malik Timberfell." The wary halfling tried to keep his calm while pointing to his friends, but he kept his other hand near his weapons, just in case. Idriana knelt and began to restoke the fire, adding some pieces of wood that had been scattered from the pile. The flames grew and allowed the group to see the entire chaos of the campsite more clearly. The two deceased human travelers, seemingly unaware of the danger of their surroundings, had pitched their tents, made fire, and were in the process of cooking dinner when the goblins attacked. Being caught by surprise, they didn't fare well. They were looted where they were cut down, and then the goblins moved on to the tents and the cart, which had been overturned and some boxes broken open in the process. The group began sifting through the wreckage of the cart to see if it was possible to identify who it had belonged to. Alton noted, as they picked through the contents, that the boxes were packed with loads of goods that seemed quite familiar to him. Bags of grain, flour, salt, utensils, and cookware, all quite like things he had seen back in Dornan's tavern in Neverwinter. The halfling rogue dismissed these thoughts, though, as it was all stuff that could be found in any general store back in the big city. Poking around a bit more, he also found a leather map case that seemed familiar, but it too was a commonly available item, so he forced himself to forget his concerns. Employing her skills as a tracker, Adriana was able to piece together what had happened to the travelers. Speaking in Elvish to Erevan, who would then translate into Common for the rest of the group, she related the sequence of events. First, it appeared that there had been 4 in the traveling group, not just 2, based upon the number of mess kits and drinking cups they collected. The wagon must have broken down, and with the vehicle being so heavily loaded, the repairs would have been difficult. They likely decided to camp for the night, to continue the fix in the morning. While they cooked their food, a group comprised mostly of goblins attacked. She couldn't say for sure what the other creature had been, except that it was quite a bit larger, based upon the tracks. The monsters had likely been watching them for a time, but had waited for the cover of night to spring their attack, because the humans had no infravision. The half-drow also said that at least one member of the traveling group seemed to have been captured alive, and that based upon the footprints and blood trails she'd found, the group could follow where the goblins had taken the unfortunate survivor, if they wanted to. Malik returned to the spot next to their wagon where the first goblin lay dead in the dirt. The dwarf barbarian removed the strange mask he'd seen earlier, drawing it closer to the firelight so he could better make out the details. The eyepieces were framed in large, perfectly round bronze circles with an odd blue glass inside the frames. These were connected to a smaller golden nose piece that hooked downward toward the face like a beak. Both were attached to a stout leather strap which would, when adjusted and affixed, give the wearer an appearance of a wide-eyed owl. Malik had definitely seen them before. They belonged to Dornan, their employer back in Neverwinter, the same gnome that had sent them on the road in the first place. A feeling of dread overwhelmed the dwarf as he pondered what that might mean. Alton, Jaws, then these belong to Dornan. He might be in a fair bit of trouble, I'm afraid. Malik ran his fingers back and forth over his close-cropped red hair, a habit that displayed his worry, and held the goggles extended to his friends to examine. Alton and Jazz exchanged looks. The cart seemed familiar to them, and it was loaded with the same kind of supplies as the ones they carried. And now they'd come across this mask? The obvious conclusion was that Dornan, their boss, had been a part of this first group, which was likely headed to the same destination they were. But his group had been waylaid, never making it to the town of 3 Towers. And since his body wasn't here among the dead, it seemed quite possible that Dornan was the one that had been captured alive by the goblins, taken off to some dark corner of the realms. These glasses, a rare magic item which he referred to as his goggles of the night, were evidence enough to tie the tale together. But there were some aspects of the story that left Alton puzzled. Why wouldn't Dornan have just come with us? He wondered aloud. I mean, he would have been safer, that's for sure. And why wouldn't he have told us that he was planning on meeting us there in 3 Towers? The halfling thief frowned. He didn't like mysteries. Mysteries were signs of a plot. Maybe he was headed somewhere else. Another bar in another town, Jazzberry shrugged, while she held her hands over the fire to warm them. But whatever the reason, we can't just leave him. I mean, if it were us, Dornan would hire a rescue party at the very least, maybe even go along himself. Erevan inserted himself into their conversation. I'm sorry, my friends, but did you say the name Dornan, as in Dornan Halfjack the gnome? If so, he's exactly who we were hoping to see. Adriana looked up at the mention of the name, recognizing a brief snippet of the foreign words. That's right. Jazzberry looked over to the elf noble. We were supposed to bring these things to a tavern in 3 Towers, just south of here. He was planning on meeting us there, I guess. She paused for a beat. Do you two know Dornan? Alton eyed them both with greater suspicion. The halfling thief might not have liked mysteries, but he hated coincidences. Yeah, why are you looking for him? Your friend has been seeking adventurers to hire. I know not for what. But word reached us in the high forest, and I took my opportunity to travel the road and find glory where I may, to bring pride to House Leandon. His voice increased inflection as he spoke, producing an almost inspiring effect. It seems as though destiny is guiding us, for now we have an adventure just to find him. I say, on to greater glories. I say, let us save your gnomish friend. He then said something that sounded bold and poetic, but it was in Elvish, so the only one who appreciated it was Adriana, who smiled approvingly. The halfling rolled his eyes at the elf and turned back to his dwarf companion. Well, Malik, if Dornan was captured, I think he would want me to have his goggles. After all, I'll need them when I have to save him. There was a short silence, and then Malik belly laughed at Alton's words. Dornan had bragged many times about how the magic item made it easier to see in the dark, and this did make them a good fit for the halfling thief, who had no natural infravision to speak of. So the barbarian dwarf relented and handed them over to Alton, who took them with great gusto. Pardon the interruption, but if you're enjoying my work, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload a new video. The group, now consisting of 5 adventurers, decided to work together to save the missing gnomish merchant that they all seemed to know to one degree or another. But they had all been traveling for hours, and their weary bodies needed rest before they could continue. And since it would be easier to follow the trail of goblin prints in the daylight, they decided to make camp for the night. Because this location was already known to the monsters, the group knew that staying here would be dangerous, so they packed up what they could salvage from the campsite and moved on to find another spot. After traveling a couple of miles, they relied on Idriana's expertise as a ranger to find an isolated camp that was unlikely to be spotted by raiders. They made themselves as comfortable as they could, laying out their bedrolls around the fireside and gnawing at some flavorless rations. Idriana began to cook the grouse she'd taken earlier in the day, jabbing it through with a stick and letting it hang over the fire. Jazzberry, the tiefling bard, was always ready to entertain an audience. She began playing them a soft tune on her lute, singing a forlorn song about love lost. Idriana, never having seen such an instrument before, let alone one played with such skill, was mesmerized by Jazzberry's plucking of the strings. What need have I for eyes if I can't see you near? Beneath the starlit sky, I missed my love so dear. I stacked the ebon coal to light a fire bright. It fights away the cold, but does no good at night. And so I pace the floor, walking circles all alone. I strum the chords, I play the notes, I bury all your bones. Her music was haunting and surreal, touching both their heartstrings and the very strings of creation, bringing an illusion of the moon down close enough to almost touch. As she continued, all the stars from the heavens dropped down to swirl about in a breathtaking display of intricate motion that induced a feeling of drunkenness among them. The halfling rogue moved away from the campfire. Alton, though he was impressed by Jazzberry's powers, had seen this show many times before. When he'd started working with her back in Luskan, he had to constantly remind himself that he wasn't there to watch her. He was there to lift purses from her slack-jawed audience. Their victims, usually ale-soaked sailors staggering from the tavern, were ready for distraction after many days at sea, and Jazzberry satisfied their curiosity with dumbfounding performances like these. Sometimes, Alton could get swept up in her distractions. Her impromptu street shows really were that good, and he would have to snap himself back to reality and back to his attentions. With Jazzberry's able assistance, Alton could make off with several purses on a good night. But after a time, street performers were banned within Luskan city walls, and, well, those salad days were long gone now. The thief walked away from the fire to experiment with his new goggles. Dornan, the former owner, had said that these spectacles made it easier to see at night, but never really elaborated more than that. Alton now attempted to fit them, adjusting the strap smaller, and was amazed when he got them to sit on his face. The world, which had previously been an inky blur, was suddenly brought into high contrast and sharp relief. Though his view was devoid of color, he could suddenly see as well as a hunting owl, with the dimmest of starlight making his surroundings as bright as noonday. Alton's imagination ran wild. These glasses could open a whole new world of illicit acquisition for him, and he grinned for the first time since leaving Neverwinter. Perhaps making this trip wasn't a mistake after all. And that is where we are going to leave it for today, but rest assured we will pick up from where our story left off in next week's episode. Thank you so much for staying all the way till the end of the video, and if you enjoyed my work, please consider donating to my Patreon, which you can find linked in the description. I appreciate all of you, and until next time, please be kind to yourselves and to each other.